Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Behind the Work, the show for the ambitious person looking to level up their lives, their careers, and their businesses. I'm your host, Jessica Santana, and if this is your first time tuning in, I want to say welcome to the show. So Emma Grede done pissed off a lot of people last week when she said that work from home culture is career suicide for women. But here's the thing, she is not wrong. Don't eat me up, y'all. Don't eat me up. The headline makes it sound like the problem is where we work. At home, in an office, hybrid, remote. Working from home is not inherently harmful. But because success has never been just about output, it has always been about proximity, visibility, relationships, the informal conversations before and after meetings, the quick check-ins, the I thought of you for this moments, the rooms where decisions get shaped before they ever get documented. But the truth is, the location has never been the real variable. The real variable is access to relationships, access to information, access to power. And if we're being honest, those things have never been distributed equally, especially for women of color. Let me start with something personal. There was a point in my career where I was doing everything right, hitting deadlines, over-delivering, being the reliable one on the team, the one people could count on. But then came the performance review process, and the feedback from my manager wasn't about my work. It was about my visibility. And I remember sitting there thinking, how can I be invisible when I'm doing the most work in the room and on the team, and when I'm just killing myself? But what I learned, and what so many women of color learn eventually, is that work does not speak for itself. People speak for your work. And if you don't have the right people in the right rooms speaking your name when you're not there, your work does stay invisible. Now, layer that reality onto remote work, because what work from home does is strip away accidental visibility. Those moments where someone sees you staying a little bit late, overhears your problem-solving abilities, pulls you into a conversation you weren't invited to, and suddenly everything becomes more intentional. And that sounds good in theory until you realize the system was never designed to be intentional about including everyone. There's actually research that backs this up. A 2024 study published in the Harvard Business Review found that junior women received 40% more feedback from their managers when they sat physically near their colleagues. 40%. That is not a small gap, y'all. That's the difference between growing quickly and stagnating quietly. That's the difference between someone investing in your development as an employee and someone forgetting you're even there. So when people say remote work is hurting women's careers, what they're really saying is the system relies heavily on proximity to function. But here's where we need to be honest and a little uncomfortable. That system, it was never working equitably to begin with. A system that always relied on proximity to power while never equitably granting access to that proximity in the first place. A system where women of color have historically been excluded from informal networks, overlooked in rooms they were technically present in, and denied sponsorship even when their performance spoke for itself. Remote work didn't create that. It exposed it. Another body of research out of Harvard shows that women's advancement isn't primarily stalled because of flexibility or family responsibilities. It's because of organizational structures and cultures that quietly reroute them out of power paths. Let that sink in. It's not that women opt out, it's that systems push them sideways. And for women of color, that push is even stronger because now you're navigating gender bias, racial bias, and proximity bias all at the same time. And you can't be in the room and still be overlooked. And you can be on the Zoom and still be unheard. And you can be doing the work and still not be seen as the one who should lead it. I've lived that. Being in meetings where your idea lands and then lands better when someone else repeats it. Being left off the follow-up email chain, not because of malice, but because of habit. Because systems don't have to be loud to be exclusionary. They just have to be consistent. Now let's talk about AI, because a lot of people think AI is going to make work more meritocratic, more objective, more about output. But the reality is it's going to do quite the opposite. AI is going to automate execution. And in a world increasingly shaped by AI, where technical skills are being democratized and productivity is easier to measure, human relationships are becoming even more valuable, not less. AI can replicate tasks, it cannot replicate trust, and it cannot replicate advocacy, and it cannot replicate the nuance of being known. Fully known, which means the differentiator becomes who is trusted, who is brought into strategic conversations, who is seen as a thought partner, and those things are built through relationships, not resumes, not Slack messages, not perfectly written reports, relationships. So now we're in a world where the technical barrier is lowering, but the relational barrier is rising. And if access to relationships is unequal, then AI doesn't fix inequality. It actually accelerates its growth. So when Emma Grede says work from home can be a career suicide for women, what she's actually pointing to is this. If you remove proximity in a system that already depends on proximity, you expose who the system was built to support. So when we talk about work from home being career suicide, what we're really naming is this. Distance makes it harder to access the invisible infrastructure of opportunity. But again, let's be clear. Remote work is not the problem because remote work has also been a lifeline. It has been a way to protect women from daily microaggressions. It has created flexibility where none existed before. It has also allowed more women to stay in the workforce. Even global research has called remote work a double-edged sword for women, creating both opportunity and risk depending on how organizations design around it. But when you remove the office, you also remove the accidental visibility, and what's left is a structure that was never designed to intentionally include women of color. No built-in pathways, no deliberate sponsorship, no systemic correction for bias. So no, the issue isn't whether remote work is good or bad. The issue is whether companies are willing to redesign how opportunity flows. If the system stays the same, remote work can amplify inequity, but that's not an argument against flexibility. That's an indictment of design. And we all know that inequity is a product of bad design, because the real question is, why does opportunity depend on who sees you instead of what you do? Because right now, most companies are still operating like this. Visibility equals proximity, opportunity equals relationships, advancement equals sponsorship. But none of those things are being systematically distributed. They're informal, which means they're biased. So what would it look like to actually fix this? Not patch it, not talk about it, but actually fix it. First, make sponsorship a system, not a coincidence. Making sponsorship a formal responsibility, not an informal favor. We know from multiple workplace studies that employees with sponsors are promoted at significantly higher rates. So why is sponsorship still based on who you click with? Companies should be assigning sponsors, especially for women of color, and holding leaders accountable for outcomes. Second, track opportunity, not just performance. Tracking who gets access to high visibility projects and correcting disparities in real time gives you a level playing field. Who is getting visibility into these projects? Who is being invited into the decision-making rooms? Who is getting feedback, and how often? Because if one group is getting 40% more feedback just by sitting closer to power, that's not performance. That's access. Third, design intentional relationship building strategies, creating structured opportunities for relationship building that don't rely on physical proximity or personality bias. Not happy hours, because I hate me a happy hour. Not forced small talk, structured, meaningful interactions, rotational project teams, cross-functional mentorship, leadership exposure sessions, because if relationships are the currency of advancement, then access to relationships must be engineered, measuring not just performance, but opportunity distribution. Fourth, decouple visibility from physical presence. If someone has to be seen in order to succeed, then the company is responsible for redefining what seen means. That could look like standardized reporting of contributions, regular talent reviews that include remote employees, documented recognition systems, because I didn't know what she was working on is not a performance issue. It's a management failure. And finally, interrogate the culture itself, training leaders to recognize and interrupt the patterns that consistently leave women of color out of the loop. Because culture is not neutral. It's built on patterns. And if the pattern is that women of color are consistently overlooked, under-sponsored, and under-advocated for, that is not an individual problem. That is a design problem. So no, work from home is not career suicide. A system that relies on proximity, ignores bias, and refuses to evolve, that is the real risk. And in an AI-driven world, this becomes a defining question, because we're designing right now, will the future of work be more equitable or just more efficient at reproducing the same inequities? Because if we don't change how relationships are built, how visibility is distributed, and how trust is assigned, then the same people who were invisible before will simply disappear faster. So the conversation we should be having is not, should we go back to the office? It's, who does this system actually work for? And what are we willing to redesign to make sure it works for everyone? Because proximity was never the advantage. access was. And if we're serious about equity, then access has to be intentional, not accidental. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Behind the Work. If you like this week's episode, I hope that you subscribe to the YouTube. Make sure that you follow us on Apple Podcasts and on social media, and share this with a friend in power who might have the opportunity to make a difference. See you all next week.